Welcome back to Game Points. I am your host, Matthew Ross. Now, this is the new theme song we're testing out for our next guest. He's the only guy who could pull this theme song off. It is pompous. It is also refined. Let's bring in our next guest. He is on Cauz and Cauz on TSN 1050. You can follow him on twitter.com/mcauz, C-A-U-Z 56. And check out his work on CFL.ca as well. It's our classy guest, Cauz. How you doing?
I was busy cleaning my monocles and starching my top hats. Thank you very much. I don't understand why you'd be playing this sort of music for me.
Well, you're like a blue blood, Matt. You know, this is actually the original theme song for Hunter Hearst Helmsley, who later became Triple H.
Oh, okay. See, that's, well, let's see. If we were going to go on, like, sort of theme music for what you guys are trying to do, what about, like, the Poet, Leaping Lanny Poffo?
We discussed that, the genius. Yeah, we discussed that.
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, as a kid, I always wanted to be Bobby the Brain Heenan, which probably shouldn't come as a shock. I never pictured myself as a wrestler. There's a certain level of athleticism involved. I wanted to be the guy with the briefcase of cash, saying I was from Beverly Hills, and then hitting people from behind and then running away.
Now, that is exactly what Mo Khan here and Stefano Micella in studio play constantly, is Bobby Heenan clips all the time on the computer here in studio.
He's the best. He really is. The pencil neck geeks. And I'm from Beverly Hills. It was awesome.
All right. Yes, we're going to talk some other things.
Sure.
Now, Matt, here's a big question. As soon as I saw this, I really wanted to ask you what your thoughts were on this. CBC reported huge ratings for Montreal versus Boston for Game 7, and some people called them record-breaking. Something like over 4 million people were watching that on Hockey Night in Canada. You add, of course, the RDS numbers as well. So if that is the case, then would it be a stretch to say that it doesn't matter if Toronto's in the playoffs or not at all?
No, I mean, let's face it. And, okay, this next sentence everyone's going to hate, but Toronto is going to generate more interest than even Montreal. And it's strictly just about numbers. It's just about population, so don't everyone get angry at me. But let's face it, Montreal-Boston is a great rivalry. A Game 7, you're always going to attract more attention anyway. And also, people hate the Bruins. I can't stand them. Watching Marchand out there, I couldn't help but think about the Big Nose sketch from the beginning of Monty Python, The Life of Brian. So it was a combination of a whole bunch of different things that came together. Good on Montreal for winning, and I'm not shocked at all by those numbers.
All right. What is the interest like in Toronto for the playoffs at this point? Obviously, they're not Habs fans, so are they rooting for the Rangers? Are they following the Western Conference? Don't tell me you're watching the IHF. I mean, what's whetting the appetite?
Canada, their thrilling overtime victory today, which was anyway. Here's what it comes down to: Montreal-Boston. It was basically like we were put into a cage, and someone said, "Do you want to be bit by a poisonous snake or a poisonous spider?" That's what it was like. I was rooting for Montreal because Boston, I know I'm from Toronto, but I hate Boston more. It's just a team of jerks compared to Montreal, and Subban's one of my favorite players in the league. But now with the Rangers, I mean, they're not the feel-good story, which is kind of macabre, but how can you not root now for Dominic Moore and Marty St. Louis? So for Toronto, it's easy. We've shifted all allegiance. Anyone who's rooting for Montreal against Boston, it's now gone. We've jumped that bandwagon. We're all cheering for New York.
Matt, who's Rob Ford cheering for?
Rob Ford he's really rooting for the collective amnesia of the city of Toronto because he's going to come back soon after this awesome time in rehab, which basically sounds like a great water park. Just go, have a blast. And he's going to try to make people forget all the bad things he did. So he's rooting for amnesia. But let's face it, he's not that bright. He probably thinks the Leafs are in the playoffs right now.
Matt Cauz joining us here on the program. Matt, now that the Raptors are out, you following the NBA at all or no?
Of course. Oh, no, absolutely. I love the NBA. Here's how it works. The main thing I'm rooting for is anyone but Miami. That's the main thing, is I can't stand the Miami Heat. The problem with the NBA is just it's so predictable. The four teams that are left in the playoffs, it was basically the same four teams last year and the same four teams the year before, with one exception in both years. So 1 year Memphis makes it, into the Final Four. But I'm rooting for anyone but Miami, and I'm kind of rooting for Oklahoma. How could you not after Durant's great speech when he won the MVP? I think everyone right now is rooting for the Thunder.
Matt, as you know, I was down at the mothership for the CFL Draft, and
I got some issues. I had some issues with that draft.
Yes, and lo and behold, on Twitter, a picture came up with Farhan Lalji and Lee Barrett, and under it was a Twitter tweet from you. To all the good people who are smarter about the CFL than I am, how come the Stamps traded John Gott? Question mark, question mark, question mark.
Yeah, you're smarter than me. I watched Scott play last year. He was fantastic. You watch Calgary's offensive line. Just ask John Cornish how unbelievably good they are. To trade him, and he's not even 30, and he's an all-star. To trade him for number one, I know the number one draft picks in the CFL, they don't have the same impact as it is in the NFL. So I'm assuming it has to be money. In the end, when you don't know the answer, usually just ask Virgil, just ask Ted DiBiase. It's usually about the money.
But are you surprised by the flurry of first round trades that occurred within the first hour of the CFL draft? Toronto makes a big trade. Montreal and Ottawa flip-flop. Kevin Glenn goes from the Red Blacks to Vancouver. And Saskatchewan, Hamilton flip-flop picks here. Surprised by that many amount of trades considering this was a weaker draft class?
I think because of the weaker draft class and people could, flip around and not worry about losing the guy they wanted. I think, to me, what I took away from the CFL draft, one, where was the commissioner? Why wasn't he saying all the names of the picks? It's not like it's the NFL with over 30 teams. It's 9 teams. Shame on the commissioner. He should have been doing that. And my second was, I'm glad that Kevin Glenn is out of Ottawa. Let him go to BC. Let him go to a more of an established team. You know that Travis Lulay, after the shoulder injury, he's probably not going to play 18 games. You got to figure Glenn's going to play a bunch. Much better that for an older guy like him than going and getting beat up in Ottawa.
It's a good point. Matt Cauz joining us here from TSN 1050. Speaking of quarterbacks, Mo and I were just chatting about this off the air. A guy who had such buzz around him. I'm anxious to see what happens come training camp and the summer as to whether or not he'll reestablish himself. Your thoughts on whether or not we'll see a big marketing impact or a big on the field impact from Drew Tate this year?
Oh, that's a good. No. I was with you excited, but we know there's two things we know about Drew Tate. Either he's got really long, horrible hair, or he's injured. And that's really what it is. And we're all going to get excited about Drew Tate because he shows us the flashes. A couple of years ago, he was looking great and then got injured against the Argonauts. And I always get sucked in. It's the same way I would get sucked in that Chris Leak could finally become a starter because I watched him play as a Florida Gator. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to get sucked in by Drew Tate because eventually he's going to get hurt and then Calgary's going to go through 3 or 4 other quarterbacks. So I'd love to see it happen because even though I root for the Argonauts, I also root for young quarterbacks to come up and make a name for himself in the league. It makes the CFL much more fun, but I'm not buying into Tate.
Matt, you look at the CFL East Division this year. How many wins will it take to win that division? And secondly, the Argonauts got a former Alouette and Brian True as new O-line coach. Do you like that hiring?
Well, first, the CFL in the East, 6 wins? We're gonna maybe 5. No, I'm just kidding. That's me.
Well, why are we still doing divisions? I thought they were flirting with 9 teams and top 6 make the playoffs. Why are we still doing 2 divisions?
I don't know. Well, if you're in the East, you love divisions because more of you get to make the playoffs. I hate divisions. I just let them all play. And also, 9 teams. Every week there's going to be a bye. The CFL is basically at war with math, which is what I'm going to love about this year. As for the O-line coach, I get nervous about everything right now with the Argonauts because for about a year or two, they just had something we've never had for so long. They had continuity, they had stability, and now I've got to check every day to see who's here, who's not. They brought in that quarterback from TCU, Casey Paschal, who's actually a really interesting story from TCU. So to help back up behind Ricky Ray, but for me with Toronto, it's still going to come down to can that defense improve from what we saw last year.
Matt Cauz joining us from TSN 1050 as we break down all things, well, anything really. That's how versatile you are, Matt. In addition to
right now, I'm wearing my Peter Budaj game-worn jersey. I'm so excited for Game 2. So excited.
Now, speaking of excited, how about your over 500 Blue Jays?
That's right. Take that, everyone else. You know what? There's one good thing with the Blue Jays this year. If you look at run differential, they're the only team in the American League East that is in the plus. Everyone else is in the minus right now, so that is a positive. I'll say this for Toronto. It's basically all because of their offense. And, I mean, Hutchison, well, he had a complete game shutout, so everyone's hoping he can build on that. But it just feels like we're all waiting for it. You know, it's almost like Drew Tate. Everything starts out really well, then everything goes to hell in a handbasket. And that's the same thing with the Blue Jays. They're doing great right now. They're looking for the sweep of Texas, but no one's really buying into it. And I don't think anyone is until after the All-Star break. And if they are doing well, part of it's just because the rest of the East stinks. I mean, right now there's almost this myth of competitiveness with the Blue Jays that, they're for real. But basically what I'm saying is I'm scorned. I need much longer before I'll be convinced.
You need to be wined and dined a little bit, right?
I always need to be wined and dined. I'm not a cheap date, and I'm fine with the other person paying. Pride, that's for the other guy. Self-respect, integrity. I'll trade that for a nice cut of steak and a good bottle of wine.
Wow. All right. I don't know. Stefano, does that mean that we have to switch his music now? Does that still fit with that kind of mindset?
Well, let's see. Bobby Heenan liked to take advantage of other people, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the similarity is still there.
Yeah,
absolutely. And then after they buy me the meal, I'm going to hit them with a briefcase and run to the next person that'll feed me.
He is Matt Cauz, the opportunist. Now, CFL.ca. What do you have up? Anything? What's going on there?
No, not yet. We're going to be starting when training camp starts. That's when I'll start cranking out columns. Early on, it'll be looking back at the most curious decisions of the off season, guys to look out for, and how much I'm going to miss Patrick Kabongo, who just announced his retirement. Maybe my favorite offensive lineman, just because A, his name, B, his sheer girth. He was fun to watch. I'm going to miss him. I just liked having Kabongo in the league.
Kabongo. It's fun to say, isn't it?
It is. It really is. Like, that's not the name of a pitcher, or that's not the name of a golfer. Like, if your name is Kabongo, you're pretty much going to be an offensive lineman.
By the way, Matt, Matthew Ross, Stefano Micella, and yours truly were sabotaging the draft, the polls that the CFL has.
Yes. Let me explain this, Matt.
What?
So
what happened?
So here's the deal. So CFL.ca has a fan poll, right?
Yeah.
And it is such a poorly run poll that you can vote as many times as you want by just refreshing your browser. Like, they don't block the cookies. So every week, if there's an Alouette spin to it, in the studio here, the three of us during our program, while we're talking on air, because we're that lame, we actually try and sabotage the poll by just voting hardcore on the Alouettes. So, who do you think has the best head coach? Wow, 99% view the Alouettes as having the bet. So it's just silly. So we view ourselves almost like anonymous, right? So we're doing this for the betterment
Renegades.
of CFL.ca, until they figure it out, till they realize how bad it is, how poor it is that they have this going.
I don't know what's more lame, the firewall at CFL.ca or you clowns. Let's face it, all your time being spent on that. I feel bad for your guests. You're talking to them, you're ignoring them because you're busily voting for Brandon London over and over again. And are you guys like the WikiLeaks version here in Canada? Like,
almost.
Are you Snowden?
Almost.
Are you going to exile in Moscow?
I voted about 20 times during our conversation here.
Oh, how dare you?
Yeah. He is Matt Cauz, TSN 1050. Your show, for people that are listening from Toronto or on the road there or listening online, it is when to when?
It breaks my heart you don't know this.
What do you mean?
I know this.
9 a.m. to noon, Monday to Friday. And by the way, holiday Monday, not a holiday for Bob and I. We're slaving over a hot radio for 3 hours to bring you the most whatever. We'll be on air and we'll, make half-ass jokes.
I wasn't sure if you started at 9 or 10, that's all.
10? Who only does 2 hours of radio? Lazy people. 3 is the max, is the optimal amount.
Lazy people, like guys that don't write for CFL.ca till training camp starts?
I'm busy doing other things right now. I got a full plate. I have a wine exam coming up. I got a lot on the go.
Fair enough. Matt, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, I'm going to go watch old YouTube clips of Andre the Giant right now.
Well, Stefano, I'll share your email with Stefano here. He'll send you a whole bunch of Bobby Heenan stuff.
Oh, nice. Send it over.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot. That's Matt Cauz. Twitter.com/MCAUZ56. That's his Twitter handle. Not one Twitter handle to miss. It's a fun one to follow. So that's going to do it for our segment there on Matt Cauz. It is TSN 690. It is Game Points. We're here till 3 o'clock. Hawks and Kings coming up at 3 p.m. right here on TSN 690, but lots to get to beforehand, including in our next segment, we'll have MLB news and notes. But we have an announcement, Mo Khan. We have a Montreal Alouette that will join us at 2 p.m. Who is it? Stay tuned and find out next segment.